In this screencast, we're going to go over the second part of creating the settings within your lesson. Okay, so there's a first video that deals with the initial setup, or how to get to this screen, and deals with the subject matter above, the flow control options. So you want to make sure you watch it. That should be lesson, Moodle lesson part 1. But to get to this point, you're always going to, from your initial interface, turn editing on, and you're going to click on the activity drop-down menu. You're going to click on lesson. You're going to drop in, and we're going to start with the flow control, pick up where we left off from the part 1 video. The options in here are, as far as their controlling things, are similar to what we had before, or similar in that the idea behind what's going on. So allow students to review. What this does is that it allows students to go back and kind of see what they've done, or go back and have more options or more chances to take it. It's always a nice little feature if you want the students to be able to review. Allowing students to review will also allow them to change their answers. To display the review button, this will display a button after an incorrect answered question. It will allow a student to reattempt it. It is not compatible with essay questions, though, so if you have essay questions, you'd leave that off. The maximum number of attempts, that's how many times you're going to allow the person to go back and review and take it. Action after correct answer. Now, there's a few choices here. You could just follow the path of the lesson to where it takes you. You could show an unseen page, which means it's unknown to the student, or an unanswered page, which means that if they've skipped questions or gone back and reviewed questions, whichever questions they haven't answered yet, it would take them to those pages. The default feedback is, if it's a correct answer, it shows correct answer. If it's incorrect, it'll say incorrect answer. If you leave that on no, you're able to fill it in also, and we'll show you this and provide more descriptive detail, like if it's an incorrect answer, show them what the correct answer is, or tell them where in the book to look, or a way to figure it out. So that again would be up to you. The minimum number of questions in a lesson. This is the idea of you're controlling the student, or telling the student the minimum amount of numbers that they'll have to have complete to have it assessed on their grade, essentially. For example, let's say this parameter is set to 20. Okay, that will ensure that grades are given as though the students have seen at least this number of questions. So it may be up to 25, maybe up to 30, but they have at least seen up to 20. So they take the case of a student who only looks at a single branch in a lesson, say that it has only 5 pages in it. Okay, they then choose to end the lesson, assuming that that's an option that they have. If this parameter were left unset, so if you left this at no, okay, the grade would be 5 out of 5, which would be 100%, but they wouldn't have answered the other 15. However, with it set to 20, their grade would be reduced to 5 out of 20. Okay, so maybe, for instance, let's say you have 25 questions, you have it set to 20. Well, let's say someone answers all 25, so they've gone over at least the minimum. And let's say they get 23 out of 25 correct, they'd have a 92%. But then if they only had answered the 5, thinking they were finished, and it was set to a minimum of 20, again, it would go back to the idea of a 25%. So that's how you can kind of control how much a student has to do and how much work they have to do. The number of pages or cards to show. This parameter is really only used in the flashcard type of lesson. The default is 0, which means that all the pages or cards, depending on how you look at it, are shown in a lesson. Setting this parameter to a non-zero value shows that that number of pages, so the student would know that if you set it to like 14, that they'll show that it has 14 pages and whatnot. Okay. Less formatting. Really, the slideshow option here, you really only need to set it to yes if you're importing a PowerPoint, which is a little bit more technical than it sounds, in that it's not just a matter of uploading it and it accepts it. There's a few things you have to do, and it's a little more advanced setting that we'll show later on. So you really don't need to mess with this or are concerned with it if you're not importing a PowerPoint. And if you do, the idea of display the menu left, that's showing all the slides on the left. greater than, only display if has a grade greater than. So it's a matter of showing the next slides or the next progression if they're doing well and their grades are high past a certain percentage that you set. And the progress bar at the bottom will also detail how many pages are in there, or how many pages they're looking at and where they are in the progression. Access control, the password, that's, typically you want to leave it to no, but if you set it to yes and then you set the password, it's on you to make sure the students get that password. It's a nice way to kind of protect it, especially if you're using it as a quiz or a test. You could do that, and that they couldn't access it until you give them the password. But again, it would be on you to get that to them the most reliable way possible. You can also control by clicking disable. Notice available from, you can set the date and time that it's available from. So if you just want it to be available for a week, just for a day, just between certain hours, you could do that. Let's see, upon. This one gets a little different. It's kind of a neat little feature. But this setting allows the current lesson to be dependent upon a student's performance in another lesson that is in the same course. Okay? If the performance requirement is not met, then the student will not be able to access this lesson. So initially, if it's the first one, you wouldn't want to put that on there. But if it's another one, you wouldn't, and you want to say, well, it's dependent upon, let's say time spent. This is, the student must spend this amount of time in the required lesson, or the fact that it's completed, the student must have completed the required lesson, or a percentage, meaning that the student got a grade better than, and you set the percent before they could go on to another lesson. So especially if you're building it throughout the course, it's a way to say, well, before you can move to lesson 2, you have to know the material in lesson 1. So it's a way to possibly control the student's retention or understanding. Pop-up file a web page. This would appear at the beginning of the course, so that if you wanted to watch a video first, or link to a web page, or see an article, you could do that here. And this would just control the box that it pops up in, similar to like when you see a pop-up page inside Moodle yourself, or when you set the web pages to pop up. The others, with the idea of link to an activity, the drop-down menu contains all the activities for the course. So it gives you all the activities that are in the course, and this is just a sample. It's a huge box that kind of scrolls up and down. So every activity you create in the course is available, and it allows you, if one is selected, then the link to that activity will appear at the end of the lesson, so they could drop them right into it. That's kind of a nice feature. Number of high scores displayed, that's showing the student how, without giving names, it's showing the student other high scores of other students to kind of give them a gauge of where they are compared to others. So you could control if you just want the highest shown, or a collection of the highest, you'd adjust that number. And if you look here, it's actually a required field, something to put in there. So we'll just change it to 1. Use this lesson setting as default. What happens is that if you know you're going to be using these settings for lessons repeatedly, if you put this on yes, okay, and then hit save, or save and display, or save and return to course, the settings that you have it at will always be the default setting. So every time you come back in, it'll be at that. And if you know you're going to be using that, that's a good idea. All right. Visible, if you don't want to hide it unless you don't want the students to see it. Otherwise, you want it to show. And the ID number deals more with the gradebook, as far as like setting an ID. It's an advanced setting. It's really not something that we want to worry about or mess with. And so there's 2 options here. You can click Save and Return to Course, or you can click Save and Display. Save and Display will drop you in to the editing functions, where you can begin to create questions for inside the lesson. And then Save and Return to Course will take you back to the initial interface, which is what we're going to do here. And when our screen refreshes, assuming it will, cross your fingers. Hopefully. Okay, back into the course. I'm going to move you over. We're going to scroll down to the corresponding week, and there's the icon, and there's the name we've given it. The next set of tutorials go into the idea of creating the questions themselves.